In under 10 years, live streaming has completely changed the way that people around the world protest. This week, Ricochet caught up with live streamers from the Black Lives Matter movement and the 2012 Quebec student strike to learn more about the effect that this technology is having on social movements. So we're just here at the Media Activist Research Group conference at Lakehead University on Chippewa Anishinaabe territory, and I'm with Chenjerai, who came here all the way from South Carolina to talk about live streaming, because you've been covering the Black Lives Matter movement and police brutality protests for quite a while now.
Right.
So can you tell me a bit about how live streaming is changing protests and the direction that it's going in?
Yeah, well, I mean, like with all sort of alternative media, or citizen journalism, you're getting a perspective that's less edited, less produced, and also where like the media isn't just blatantly misframing things or lying like mainstream media often does, right? But I also think there's a couple of other things going on. One is that you have a much more of a sense of like continuity, like there's always a protest. If you go to the different live stream channels, it's like you realize every day, all day long, somebody's protesting something. So it helps us to sort of understand that the movement is ongoing. Another thing that it does is it gives you a lot more footage of those protests. We get to see really how the police misuse their power and how they use force, right? You get a lot of different footage of that, not just like one CNN clip, but like, anybody who has a camera who's doing it, you know what I mean? And the third thing, and this is really important, is that now people are using live stream. When people watch it, they're watching a lot of times because they want to be a part of the protest, like they want to virtually experience it. There's no reason for you to tune into live stream just to see what happened with the protest. You could do that anywhere. But people who sat there and watched these protests for like hours are there because they virtually want to feel like they're participating, and they do using that medium and that platform.
Can you tell me about some of your experiences live streaming protests, how like maybe things have changed based on the live stream getting out to people or police seeing it, or...
Right. I mean, there's a lot of cases. I mean, there's one though I think in Ferguson with the guy who taught me how to live stream, and his name is Rebel Z, John Ziegler. But basically, he caught a police officer who basically was talking to a bunch of journalists and protesters, and in the process, the officer told them basically go fuck yourself, and so they quickly nicknamed him Officer Go Fuck Yourself. Sent that, but it was like John was live streaming, so he took that footage, sent it out, and it kind of went viral. And that officer ultimately wound up getting fired, which is good because somebody who's telling citizens who are protesting peacefully to go fuck themselves doesn't need to be working.
What's your name, sir? Your name's Go Fuck Yourself? All right, go fuck yourself.
Wow.
Hello, officer, go fuck yourself.
Go fuck yourself, he's trying to kill me.
And so, I mean, with such a low barrier way of producing media, there's probably going to be a lot more people doing it. Do you have any tips? Or, I mean, I've been in situations where live streamers, it's been debatable whether they're helping or whether they're showing stuff that, people shouldn't see, or that can be taken and re-edited and remixed into something that doesn't have the right context. Do you think there's kind of any few pointers or like code of conduct that you would give to live streamers?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, I think in general you always have to be respectful to the people that you're trying to cover, even officers. I mean, I'm not disrespectful to officers. I'm just going to be bold about catching them. But for example, if you're like protesting indigenous people who have certain feelings about the camera or certain things they don't want to be, recorded, then maybe you shouldn't record that. I think the biggest thing is that you have to think of yourself as part of a collective, and I think that's one thing that's dangerous about these technologies is that they're presented to us like everybody's their own individual and they're just doing their own thing. And I think we can't think of ourselves as individuals. That's counter-revolutionary.
So now I'm with Laith Marouf, who was one of the main live streamers in the 2012 student protests in Montreal, which actually helped bring down the government there. So can you tell me a bit about what role live streaming played in that movement and what that looked like?
Well, live streaming played a huge role during the strike in Quebec because if you compare to previous strikes in Quebec, and student strikes are a reoccurrence every 5 to 10 years in Quebec history, you would see that this was the longest existing strike. It lasted almost 6 months and had the largest numbers of students on strike. And I would argue that part of that sustainability of the strike was the existence of a live stream. I would say at least 10 people used the footage of CUTV to clear themselves in court. Okay, so that's a huge number. CUTV was there also for a lot of incidents that in a way CUTV had to intervene in because of the presence of our cameras. It allowed us because our live stream and our cameras and equipment were so technologically advanced and so on. It gave us a authority, a clout that I think most live streamers don't have with their cell phones and so on. As a Palestinian, growing up, looking at the mainstream media, how they speak of Palestine and cover the issues of Palestinian rights and so on, it was very clear that one of the biggest battles for the Palestinian communities is to have media that is supportive of their rights, that actually tells their story and so on. So this was one of my drives to getting into community media production, press, and then after that radio, and finally into video, and being the executive director at the time of CUTV. And so if you cannot have your own storytelling outlets and media outlets as communities that are in struggle, then you're held hostage to the interpretations that are put forward by the mainstream media, and you have no right to complain at that point, honestly, So it is very, very important to create resources that are community controlled, and specifically television and video are the most effective, obviously, venue. So